Senate Jobs and Economic Growth Committee to order. Today is Wednesday, April 22nd. Just a reminder, members, that this is an official committee hearing and it is being recorded and live streamed as well. Today we have one bill on the agenda, Senate File 4481 with Senator Anderson. Welcome to the committee, Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great to be back in the front of the Jobs Committee. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to present this bill. I do have the A4 Authors Amendment, Mr. Chair, and a verbal amendment to that. I don't know how you want to take this.
Why don't we have Senator Housley move the A4 Authors Amendment, and then Senator Anderson, do you want to describe your amendment to the amendment?
Well, the amendment would just be on line 2.24, where it says 4 full-time workers or less. I want to change that to 5.
Okay. Senator Housley, will you accept that change in your motion?
Yes, I accept that change in my motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So, Ms. Fontaine, do we have to take a vote on the amendment to the amendment, or can we just do it all in one motion?
I would just you could just do it all in one motion. That's his author's amendment. He wants to incorporate that as a change. So just take it all as one.
Great. So all those in favor of the A4 amendment as amended, signify by saying aye, and then also put your thumbs up. So aye.
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 That's my thumb. There it is. All those opposed, say no and put your thumb down. Looks like the ayes have it. Senator Anderson, to your bill as amended.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and members, and thanks for all your important work to address the important needs from our communities and especially our small businesses during this time. I know each one of us are hearing devastating stories every day from businesses in each of our districts. This is not something that is in one area of the state or another. It's in every one of our 67 Senate districts. The COVID crisis has had a catastrophic impact on our economy and our main streets, and it's to no fault of those business owners. It's challenging enough to be a small business owner in normal times, managing overhead, costs like rent, payroll, and utilities. That all leaves little in the way of liquid cash and reserves. So you throw in the COVID crisis and you have a drastic reduction in revenue from a slowing or complete shutdown of services. And for most, it has been a complete change in their business model to respond to directions from the government to keep employees and customers safe and healthy. Many of our small businesses are on the edge of insolvency. Our small businesses provide the critical jobs and economic growth to our local economies and are keys to the incredible quality of life we have here in Minnesota. This bill will not remove all the pain and suffering, but legislation like this are critical tools for our small businesses to help stabilize the market and provide relief for our owners and entrepreneurs, workers, and their families. To the bill itself, members, the first portion of the bill is related to the Small Business Emergency Loan Program. $20 million is appropriated in fiscal year 2020 from the general fund to the Commissioner of Deed for small business emergency loans. There's an addition to the bill passed 2 weeks ago when we created this. The eligible businesses currently are those impacted in Executive Order 2004 and 2008. This adds those businesses impacted by Executive Order 2009 as well. The next section is the establishment of the small business relief grants. And I do want to make sure to publicly thank Representative Kristen Robbins for her work to really start this process on the relief grants. It's been immensely helpful. This would appropriate $10 million in fiscal year 2020 from the federal funds received by the state from the CARES Act to establish these grants. $5 million would be appropriated to the Minnesota Initiatives Foundation to serve businesses in greater Minnesota. $5 million would be to serve the businesses in the 7-county metro area. Businesses eligible for the grants up to $10,000 must be located in Minnesota, employ 10 or less full-time employees. They have to be able to demonstrate hardship as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak. For each of the regions, there's also a requirement that 1 million be used to make grants up to $10,000 to individual businesses we would identify as micro businesses. They must be located in Minnesota, employ the equivalent of 5 full-time employees or less, according to the amendment we just adopted, or the committee just adopted, and have a combined asset and annual sales for the most recent calendar year of less than $250,000 and can establish hardship as a result of COVID-19 outbreak. The small business relief grants received by individual businesses shall be used for working capital to support payroll expenses, rent, mortgage, payments, utility bills, and other similar business expenses. And that's about it, Mr. Chair. I do want to thank my co-authors, Senator Pratt, Senator Housley, and Senator Isaacson. And with that, I'm happy to stand for any questions. Mute.
Senator Pratt, I just have a quick question for you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I'd like to get to the testifiers before we question Senator Anderson, but go ahead.
I know, just a really quick question. When you did the amendment that said 5 employees or less, did you mean to include the owner in those 5?
Senator Anderson, do you?
We don't have that. That's the intention, Senator Isaacson. The intention is to have the owner as a part of that 5 or less, including the owner. So as we go along, this is hopefully, as if it passes the committee, will be sent on to rules and then on to finance. And that's the intention, is to include that.
Okay, so we're not doing it right now.
Okay.
Is that right, or am I on mute? Or
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
I just asked because the language doesn't specifically say that, and I didn't know if that mattered or not. That's all. And if he's going to do it later, that's fine. I just wanted to be clear about that. Thank you.
Why don't we, why don't we take it up? This has another stop, and we can certainly double check on that as we go along. Mr. Arlers, I'm having a hard time finding my testifier list. Can you send me a chat on who's next? First up, we have Tim Penny. Welcome, Congressman.
Thank you. Thank you for including us on the panel. I want to speak on behalf of the 6 rural initiative foundations. Our foundations have been around for 30 years, serving the 80 non-metro counties in Minnesota. We came into existence in the midst of the farm crisis back in the 1980s, and ever since then, we have invested in economic and community development activities in our respective regions. We are delighted to be asked to play a role in the distribution of the dollars contemplated in this bill, Senate File 4481. We have at each of the 6 initiative foundations expertise in grant making, in small business lending, as well as disaster recovery. In fact, just recently, the 6 initiative foundations collectively raised over $1,400,000 and distributed grants to early childhood providers who are doing critical work, and they are also part of our small business community all across Minnesota. 1,600 providers got recovery grants from us, and we set that up and distributed those dollars across the state in just 2 weeks' time. So we're clearly able to manage a program like this to the benefit of the smallest of our businesses here in the state. And as you know, especially in rural Minnesota, these smaller businesses are vital to our community vitality. In addition, we do have lending capacity. We're currently, all of us, working with the Department of Employment and Economic Development on $1 million for business disaster recovery loans, and those will soon be out the door. Some are already out the door. And last but not least, all of us over the course of time have done disaster recovery grants specific to businesses. In our case here in Southern, back in 2008, we had serious flooding in the Root River Valley, Rushford, Polka, other communities, all the way to the Mississippi River. we raised within 2 weeks' time and expended in roughly that same period of time $850,000 worth of grants, up to $10,000 per business to 120 businesses in that region. And we've done 2 or 3 similar programs since then. The most recent to respond to that Medelia fire, which I'm sure members of your committee are familiar with. That community is now, as they say, Medelia strong. But those are just a couple examples of what we've done here in southern Minnesota in the 20-county region we serve. And I can speak on behalf of the other 5 initiative foundations that they have this capacity to handle the dollars that would be appropriated here in the way that's intended, and to put those dollars to good use to shore up the businesses in our region. We have learned in disaster recovery that early dollars, even if they are not the totality of what these businesses need, are critically important, just to give them some dollars to move forward and keep their businesses operating. So thank you for considering us as a partner to distribute these grants across rural.
Thank you, Mr. Penny. Next, we have Tyler Hilzebeck from MCCD. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and feel free to begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Tyler Hilsbeck with MCCD. Chairman Pratt, thank you. Members of the committee. I'm with Metropolitan Consortium of Community Developers. I'm a small business advisor with the Open to Business program in Washington County and the interim program manager. Prior to Open to Business, I was a commercial banker working with small businesses. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. MCCD is a membership organization that represents community developers covering everything from affordable housing, credit building, small business development. And we also work with small businesses throughout the 7-county metro area through our Open to Business program. MCCD and many of our members, like Women Venture and African Development Center, are state-approved partners allocating deed funds previously approved by the legislature. I'd like to share with you what business advisors like me are seeing every day. As you can imagine, small businesses across our 7-county metro are extremely anxious right now as revenues are down across the board, sometimes to zero, with another month of bills just around the corner. They're concerned about upcoming rent payments, the ability to make payroll, and if they'll have funding opportunities to help them through operating through this crisis. Initial deed funds allocated to MCCD have been exhausted, and we were only able to help about 1 in 12 initial inquiries, or 40 total businesses. Additionally, many businesses didn't qualify for the deed loans that weren't closed down as a place of gathering, but these businesses have been hit hard as well. For example, we could technically fund a restaurant, but not a cleaning service that services that restaurant. Also, loans where 50% of the loan has to be paid back and 20% collateral isn't possible for every single business. While 100% forgivable loans would be preferred to help small businesses, the additional funding in Senate File 4481 will be able to help additional businesses get through this trying economic time. I encourage you to make federal funds available to the organizations like MCCD and our members as well. The SBA programs have been helpful, but we've also heard many examples through our client work that some of the small businesses and micro businesses are being left out of the process. Larger businesses have an advantage as they are likely to have accountants, attorneys, and established financial reporting software to navigate the application process. Smaller micro businesses that we've worked with don't have established depository relationships, and these institutions are being left out, whether they qualify for the loans or not. MCCD is doing all it can to help these smaller businesses navigate the application process for the PPP and EIDL loans through language and cultural barriers, but additional financial resources are desperately needed for the local communities. We're hearing similar stories from our city and county partners. There's a growing concern that viable small businesses throughout the counties we serve are being met with limited financial support. In Washington County, where I work as a business advisor, and as Senator Housley can attest, 95% of all businesses have 50 or fewer employees, which puts some context around how important small businesses are to the lifeblood of our communities. We believe it'll take well beyond 2020 to recover from the economic impact of COVID-19, and investments made today will allow viable small businesses to navigate through the crisis as the backbone of this recovery. Thank you, Senator Anderson, for bringing forth this bill. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get through the testimony before we take questions. Next, we have Jim Nickman from the Minnesota Dental Association. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Nickman. State your name for the record and feel free to begin when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Jim Nickman, Nickman. First, I want to thank everyone for inviting me to testify today, and also thank Senator Anderson for introducing Senate File 4481. My name is Jim Nickman, and I am a pediatric dentist who has practiced in the Twin Cities metropolitan area for the past 22 years. My particular practice serves children from birth to adulthood, and also children and adults with special health care needs. I'm also the president-elect of the Minnesota Dental Association. The Minnesota Dental Association represents approximately 3,000 dentists that work throughout the state. Dental clinics are primarily small businesses that on average employ 6 to 8 employees. Dental clinics are also vital parts of the community, not only as an employer, but as a healthcare provider. We have essentially had to close our doors in March to all but emergent care. When Executive Order 2009 first came out, it effectively reduced the amount of services that dental clinics are able to provide down to approximately 3% of the normal clinic flow. This reduction has put tremendous financial stress on the dental clinics, and depending on the length of the COVID-19 shutdown and availability of appropriate personal protective equipment, some practices may no longer be financially viable. The Paycheck Protection Program, which is the buzz right now, hopefully will help America's small business survive, including dental offices. Unfortunately for dental clinics, the timing of the loan disbursements for those that were approved and the rules for forgiveness to spend the proceeds on payroll expenses within an 8-week period from disbursement will simply push the financial crisis into the summer months. I will use our practice as an example to drive the issue home. For my practice to maximize forgiveness, much of the loan proceeds will be expended before we are able to see anything more than children who have emergent needs. We want to stay open so that we can continue to provide emergent services and alleviate the stress of patients we have the honor of caring for. The main goal is to keep our patients out of the emergency departments for dental issues, lessening the burden on our medical colleagues. We also want to ensure that dental clinics do not have to permanently close their doors, which would further harm the access to care issue that exists in parts of Minnesota, particularly rural areas. Our dental clinics are struggling, and we appreciate and need your support during this time. Thank you again for inviting me to testify, and we do appreciate your support for this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Nickman. Next, I have Elaine Rasmussen from Social Impact Strategies Group. Welcome to the committee. Ms. Rasmussen, just please state your name for the record and feel free to begin when you're ready.
Thank you so much, Chairman. My name is Johannes Elaine Rasmussen. Thank you so much to the committee and Anderson for bringing this to this important bill. Once again, my name is Johannes Elaine Rasmussen. I am I'm a St. Paul resident, founder and CEO of Social Impact Strategies Group, located in St. Paul. I am also the producer of the annual conference Connect Up Summit, which brings together underestimated entrepreneurs, local investors, and the entrepreneur ecosystem. I come to you to share my experience and recommendations on legislation SF 4481, emergency funds for small businesses. My perspective as a Black, Native, female small business owner, a futurist, a member of a local and national entrepreneur communities, ecosystem communities of practice, as well as a small business advisor. It's exciting that our state government is looking at ways to close the much needed gaps in supporting small businesses across the state. However, there are growing concerns and grave lessons to be learned from the federal programs that continue to leave Black and Brown, Indigenous, and rural small businesses out in the cold. And I want to thank my colleagues for actually mentioning some of the points that I had planned to make, so I apologize if I'm repeating them. I know this because I, like many of the entrepreneurs that we serve, have not had any luck accessing the $300 billion of funding. Here are just a few snapshots of my experience. It took me over 7 hours to collect and upload my documents for the initial EIDL loan application on the SBA site. The EIDL program was revamped, and everyone who applied before March 13th had to reapply, which took another 5 hours. I applied for the PPP program through my bank. While the application was only 2 pages, the documents required was a completely different set of documents than the EIDL loan, and I had to take additional time to collect those documents, upload them, scan them, and upload them to the bank system. I could not reach anyone at my bank to confirm my application, nor have I received any information back on my application, whether it was just received or it processed or any updates. I also applied for the PPP through another financial institution, and that took another 8 hours to complete due to crashing systems, inability to upload documents, and other complications. I also attempted to apply for the US Chamber funding and spent over 8 hours on the site hitting continuously refresh throughout the day, and I could not even get in to register. To deepen the context, English is my first language. I have a master's degree. I have finance background. I have a CPA. I have a digital accounting system. I have 4 additional staff. I have high-speed internet. I have a banker at a bank, and I'm very plugged into the ecosystem and have great relationships across the state. And with all of that, I still was not able to access any of this funding. Luck and hope should not be the plan to access these funds. With that being said, I urge you to consider the following, not only for this set of funding, but also any future business support. Create different levels of funding and different access points. So I really appreciate the fact that the amendment of 5 employees or less, because that is where many rural entrepreneurs as well as entrepreneurs of color are really focused in that 5 employees or less. The application process should not be on a first come, first serve. Open the portal for a certain amount of time for people to upload their documents. I would recommend over a 2-week period, and then go through the process, close the portal, and go through the process of going through those applications. Limited bandwidth for companies. I know companies and myself, I had to spend my whole day working on these applications, and a lot of people don't have any other staff to help manage the business. So looking at capacity is an issue of how we make these accessible to get through to these portals and programs. We also ask you to look beyond the 6 and 12-month period. We know that not only are we anticipating a resurgence of COVID, but we know that we are anticipating another pandemic at some point in the future. So using this as an opportunity for lessons learned and stratified funding along the way, not only just for today, but also in the near future. And then finally, as my colleague mentioned, Tyler had mentioned, greater flexibility in the deed program, as it is missing a whole lot of people that won't have access. And from what I understand, they haven't even given out all the money because that we think that that's because so many folks were left out. I want to thank you for your time and consideration, and we want to allow Social Impact Strategies Group to be a continuous resource on what's happening on the ground with entrepreneurs and the ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rasmussen. And finally, we have Mike Tamale from NDC. Welcome back to the committee, Mr. Tamale. Please just state your name for the record and feel free to begin when you're ready.
All right, thank you very, very much. Appreciate this opportunity. My name is Mike Tamale. I'm the founder and CEO of the Neighborhood Development Center. I appreciate very much all the effort you're putting into this unbelievable pandemic and era that we're in the middle of. The Neighborhood Development Center has worked for 30 years with over 5,000 low-income entrepreneurs, inner-city residents who've started businesses, with offering training classes, lending, technical assistance, and business incubators like the Midtown Global Market and the Mercado Central and Frogtown Square. With the deed small business emergency loan allocation that we got of $1 million, we were able to get all of that out last week, and it went to 70% entrepreneurs of color. And we got another allocation of $400,000 that will be out by tomorrow, and it'll also go out to at least 70 or 80% entrepreneurs of color. The challenge we're all facing here is how to get the next round of funding, and that includes in Washington, D.C. as well as in St. Paul, to better reach into low-income communities and with entrepreneurs of color. And we've heard a lot of the issues here already today, which I appreciate a lot. I'll just rattle off a list of problems that we've run into trying to get our low-income entrepreneurs into even to apply for the deed funding. They lack organizational connections. The timing, it's a first come, first serve process that has left all of our folks scrambling and competing against much larger businesses. Many don't have the technology at home to complete all these forms and scan them and sign them, et cetera. The language is obviously a huge barrier. Islamic borrowers have a real problem, although that actually the deed, the zero interest has worked well for them, but a lot of these other issues have gotten in the way of them succeeding with this. So the two big suggestions we have, one is to build out the networks more, both with an expanded deed loan program and the grant program. I really like your approach with the initiative foundations and with Otto Bremer. In both cases, they have really strong networks and a lot of trust in the community. So I think they can really put those networks into play. The Latino Economic Development Center and the Neighbor Development Center are two examples of groups that are very heavily focused on bringing this funding into our entrepreneurs, and will be involved hopefully going forward with this new funding. But the other big suggestion is the carve outs, and I believe Elaine just talked about this as well. But if there is a significant amount of money, even like half of the funding in the new allocation for the loan fund, to be reserved for small businesses, whether it's micro businesses under 5 or another tranche, another layer, maybe under 20 employees, so that there's money set aside with enough time for these organizations and these entrepreneurs to really work through the process and get at it without having to compete with the larger businesses. That would be huge. And last, I just want to really endorse what you're doing with the micro business amendment, and actually encourage you to think of more money put into that pot, because I don't know if you were talking about $1 million at $10,000 a piece, that's 100 deals. 2 million is 200 deals. Obviously, there's a huge, a much larger number of those kind of entrepreneurs that are critical to our economy statewide that could use that type of help, but they're going to need a little bit longer time and a little bit more hand-holding to get through the process very often. So thank you very much for your time and your attention to this critical situation.
Thank you. Senator Anderson, any comments before we take questions or amendments?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And to Mike's point, I pretty much could have just left my comments initially on the side and let our testifiers speak on our behalf. I think each of our members understand this and the need for a program like this. To Mike's point about the micro businesses, this is something that we believe is important. It is $1 million to each region. So Greater Minnesota would receive $1 million. The 7-county metro would receive $1 million. The hope here, as we go forward, I mean, I don't believe this is going to be the only attempt to try and provide funding like this. This is the second time coming around on the loan funds. I think this is going to continue to be a work in progress. I can't thank the testifiers enough for stating the need and the case and the examples of how difficult the situation is to apply for these things. Another reason why we wanted to step in and help on the micro businesses, because they don't have HR departments. They don't have folks that understand and can navigate. These are mom and pop organizations that are living the American dream by being entrepreneurs, and they didn't ask for this. So we're going to continue to try and get this right, and it's a work in progress. So I wish we had a lot more money available. But again, this is where we're at the moment. I do understand the House is in process working on their own bill. I'm just hopeful in the case of the grants specifically that this could be something that helps people really soon. The $10,000 in relief grants would be a major boost to our Main Street across the state. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Okay. First one I have up is Senator Isaacson.
So I have an amendment, so I can wait if you want to wait to do the amendment till later, or I can do it now, whatever you'd like.
Let's go to Senator Cohn. Senator Cohn, did you have a question for the testifiers, or did you want to speak to an amendment of some type?
Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, I want to make a couple of comments. I don't really have questions. What would you like?
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman and Senator Anderson, with some apologies, because I certainly have every appreciation for what the witnesses have said, difficulty people are facing. I noted Ms. Rasmussen's testimony relative to how difficult it is to deal with the federal system. But at the risk of giving everybody the bad news, Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, and let me make sure that the witnesses understand what all the legislators understand. Minnesota, like 48 other states, with the exception of Vermont, has in its constitution a provision that the state has to balance its budget constitutionally. That is unlike the federal government, which can do whatever it wants. At the risk of acting like the senior member, I have 22 years chairing various finance committees in the body. There is no money. There is no general fund money. We heard legislation in the finance committee this morning. We had this same debate. And I think it's illusory. People who are struggling, people who absolutely need support, leave them with the impression that this is going to do that, because it's not. And Mr. Chairman, let me just make the comment. I've talked a number of times about the Council of Economic Advisors, and I don't want to belabor this too much, but there are several of us, there are 2 members of each body who have the opportunity to listen, not to participate, but to listen to the council meetings. There was a special meeting yesterday, and what Dr. Mikitas, the state's chief economist, said is that the revenue report that came out last, I think last Friday or I think April 10th, which talked about a small diminishment of state revenue, did not reflect where things are, because income tax payments and sales tax payments have been delayed for a couple of months. So they really don't have the report of where state revenues are. But the expectation is we are in significant deficit. And just by way of contrast, in 2010 and 2011, the legislature, the governor, either cut, shifted, or whatever, approximately $10 billion. This is anticipated to be somewhere 20 to 25% worse. If not, that depends on how long this goes on. GDP number projected for the country for fiscal year 2020 is, I think, 5.4% minus. Well, that's a difference from where we left the session last year at about 2%. So that's a difference of about 7.5%. By contrast, the low point in the previous crisis was about, I think, 4.5%, minus 4.5% GDP nationally. Mr. Chairman, we don't have any general fund money. We don't have it. And we can pass this bill and it can go in the queue for funding. But what at some point, what the governor's going to face, maybe this legislature, but maybe it doesn't happen in time for this legislature, is an allotment of money, possibly using the budget reserve to cover present spending. And keep in mind, $11 billion from the previous go around, or $10 billion from the previous go around. Our budget reserve is $2.359 billion. So we'd still be $1 billion short if we wanted to simply cover what was appropriated a year ago. And so, Mr. Chairman, I don't know how many bills, I'm in the minority, I don't know how many bills we're going to see in the various committees now between now and the end of the session using general fund dollars. But it's not going to work. And I apologize for being Cassandra on this thing. But I think these folks have very real, very serious, and very deep problems. And they're representing not just themselves, but they're representing the people dependent on them, both business owners and the folks who are deriving support from these business owners. And it's a chain that is tragic, sudden, devastating. And I think if we as a legislature offer some false sense of hope, we're doing that much more of a disservice. So on that optimistic note, and I recognize, and Mr. Chairman and Senator Anderson, I believe you'll run, the next stop is, as Mr. Chairman indicated, is the Finance Committee, I believe. Senator Anderson, you're going to run into this in the Finance Committee. We had a lengthy debate this morning for the same things. Senator Westrom had a bill, And the bill was laid over, reworking to try to find some ability to fund it in a realistic way. So I don't know if that's the intent in this committee or not, Mr. Chairman, do something other or let it have it up, have it be determined by the Finance Committee. And I think Senator Wistrom's bill will be worked on in a way that might be satisfactory. But the bills that's presented to us right now is not.
Well,
All
Mr.
right.
Chair, if I could respond.
Yeah.
Senator Cohen, I appreciate your comments, and you're bringing a weight of reality here that's absolutely accurate. But what I would say, and I have deep respect for you, and your voice in fiscal matters are going to be missed after this session. But I will tell you, people do need hope, and this isn't false hope in the least. When you think of the need of these business today, this is when we're going to deal with, when the legislature, yourself and I included, won't be back next session. But those that will be dealing with a potential deficit, it will be even more extreme if these businesses close down. If we remove all hope and we remove any opportunity for them to survive this COVID pandemic, then we are screwed as a state. Because if we don't give hope right now, if we don't find ways to provide resources, and the federal government is printing money, and 10 million in the grant money is coming from the CARES Act, 20 million for the loan program is coming from the general fund. But this is needed now. And we will continue the debate. And I look forward to the conversation in finance and in rules and on the floor, because coming together with the governor and coming together with the House, this is critically important. So I appreciate the comments. I fully agree with you that we don't have a lot of money. We don't have the surplus we once did. But if we do not provide the assistance to these businesses in the next couple of weeks, they will not be here in a couple months to provide that revenue for the state that we desperately need to operate in full function. So,
Mr. Chairman, if I could just respond to Senator Anderson, that'd be okay. So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, I agree with what you've just said. And to be fair, let me back off a little bit. Maybe there's another way to do it. And we could pass the bill, and to be honest, it just will be more legislation. Possibly is not funded because of a deficit. No, not all money is going away. We're not going to be in deficit by $50 billion. So maybe the administration would say, look, this has a higher priority in the circumstance than other appropriations. So I'll back away a little bit, but be secure. It would be better to find some other non-general fund source. And I just understand your legislation, it's partially general fund and partially CARES. So I'm just worried about folks who really need the help. And I agree with what you're saying exactly. I'm really worried that they find themselves in a situation where we don't have the money. Now, again, maybe the administration will say, look, this is at a higher priority. If you had an assurance from the commissioner or the governor, I'd be a little bit happier about this, that this would go ahead of the line in terms of money we appropriated last year. But I haven't heard that either.
Well, Senator Cohen, and just to follow up on that, I talked to the commissioner last night. The administration is looking at how this loan program has been successful at 0%, 50% forgivable, and we're hoping that as Mr. Hilsebeck said, the requests have well outstripped the supply of that we put into the fund, and so we're hoping to keep a few of these small businesses open a little bit longer. Hopefully, my hope is we can get this money out not in a few weeks, but within something we could count in days, not necessarily weeks, without getting to too big of a number. In that, so many of these folks have been, as Ms. Rasmussen said, I think I've heard from every senator that businesses in their districts have really had a hard time getting through the SBA process, getting through the EIDL process, getting through the PPP process. But I think this has been one of the bright spots that we've had. And through our network of economic development lenders that, and then with the partnership of the Initiative Foundation, I think I'm hoping that we can keep a few of these folks open longer and able to survive this so that they can, as we talked about with Senator Matthews' bill, start opening up businesses that can operate safely, that won't set us backward from the progress that we made in controlling the infection rate of these here in the state. I mean, there's no doubt we've been one of the more successful states at flattening the curve than others.
And Mr. Chairman, let me just make a final comment. You have, with your relationship, the time you've spent with the commissioner, then I would suggest, when I actually pass this bill and want it to accomplish the purpose that this, I would agree, is a critical purpose. Then I would suggest today, tomorrow, whatever, you talk to the commissioner and make sure that it's understood that if this passes the legislature and is sent to the governor, that one, the governor will sign it, and two, the commissioner will say, look, this takes a higher priority than other things we've done. And I would suggest, for the sake of the legislature and for the sake of the folks who are going to depend on this, try to get those assurances at the front end, not the back end.
Agreed. Sarah Graham, you had a question to that point?
I'll wait. Thanks.
Okay. Then the other hand I have up is Senator Isaacson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make a couple comments and then I want to offer an amendment. First of all, notwithstanding what my illustrious senior colleague from St. Paul had to say, as not being accurate or not, I think we are in an alarmist situation. But I have to really echo the words of Senator Anderson and thank him for doing some of this work. I know that there have been several people involved in trying to get this stuff like this across the finish line, helping small businesses. And I've been working with Senator Kerr on this and came up with a couple of things we'd like to tweak it with, understanding that it might be a little late in this process that you'd accept an amendment, but wanting to see if I can get some suggestions that we might either take today or consider for future consideration as we move this thing down the road, hopefully getting it across the goal line. I really want to echo some of the sentiments I heard about, and I'm sorry I don't remember the name of the woman who spoke about the problems she had getting through this and listing off her amazing credentials. And that's someone who's really in the know. Can you imagine how hard it is to apply for these things when you have language barriers and cultural barriers? And I think that I just can't stress that enough as being an important part that we need to be sensitive to. And I think also, looking in my district and talking with people and other senators, this concept of what we see with these small mom and pop businesses that are absolutely going to be part of what brings us back from the brink after this is over. We need to be doing everything we can. And so I want to see us spend a little bit more money on the micro businesses in this bill. So I am going to offer the A5 amendment. And I'm wondering if Carlin can hand that out or email it or however you want to do this.
I'm going to email it to the members now.
Thank you. Senator Pratt, would you like me to wait till it gets emailed out or do you want me to just start talking about it?
Let's give it just a second here.
Ms. Fontaine, can you send it to me too?
Nope, don't send it to Paul. Please don't. Just kidding.
Yes, I will. I will send it to you, Senator Anderson, just a second.
Thank you.
Ms. Fontaine, you're muted.
Did the group get it? I haven't sent it to Senator Anderson yet, but did everyone else get it?
I got it.
Okay, just 1 second then. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Mr. Chair, once Senator Isaacson has had an opportunity to talk about the amendment, I would like to ask him a question related to the amendment.
Okay.
I think I just sent it to you, Senator Anderson. Okay.
This is Senator Goggin. I have not seen it yet in my email.
Andy, Mr. Eilers, Mr. Chair, Mr. Eilers, did you, are you posting it to the public?
Yes, Chair Pratt and members. So I posted it on the Senate hearing page for today. So that's already been posted, and then I will send over to Senator Goggin as well.
I apologize. This is the first time doing this, so
Yeah.
trying to get it out.
Does anybody else not have the amendment on the committee? Okay, I don't see anybody saying no. So with that, Senator Anderson, do you have the amendment? Senator Anderson?
Is he frozen or reading?
I couldn't tell.
I can't either. Blink, Senator Anderson. He's frozen.
Yeah, he's frozen. Senator Isaacson, your amendment overloaded the system. We lost Senator Anderson.
I hear that a lot, actually. So I tend to have that effect on things.
Looks like we lost him, so.
You want to wait? I can wait till he comes back.
Yeah, let's just give him a second to come back here.
No problem.
That somehow happened to me last week. There he is. Senator Anderson.
I'm sorry. Yes, sorry. I think the intense usage of bandwidth here with my kids at school are bumping me out. So hopefully we'll be good the rest of the committee. Do you want me to respond to the amendment, or
why don't we let Senator Isaacson talk about the amendment, and then we'll get your response. Just want to make sure you were back online and you had it. All right, Senator Isaacson, to the amendment.
Thank you. And what I'm seeing, and I want to, please forgive me, this amendment was drafted and then redrafted to fit the delete all. So I might be redundant in a spot, and if so, it might need some cleanup there. Like I talk about the 5-person rather than 4 thing as well. But the goal here is to really talk about focusing on those micro businesses that have a language barrier in obtaining a small business loan. And then looking at expanding the amount within the 10 million from 1 million per region, metro and rural, to 1.5 million in metro and rural. And then focusing also on the idea that the business has a physical address, a permanent physical location. Those are the 3 things I think that correct me if I'm wrong, Carl, but those are the 3 things my amendment do to change your bill. I think each one of them represents a thoughtful approach to, or a discussion about how we can continue to show and act on, follow through with our words with actions, and how we're going to be supporting these micro businesses and making sure that we're not leaving, or we're trying to leave as few businesses behind as possible, as well as expanding the amount. Because I think that, and I'm not, an economist, but in talking with Senator Herr about this, who's been passionate and a leader on this issue, I really want to make sure we're putting enough money aside. And I heard from one of our testifiers who much of my arguments were already eloquently made up by the testifiers, but that the 1 million apiece isn't going to be enough. I'm not sure if 1.5 million gets us any closer in a substantive way, but I feel like every dollar we can send that way is important. The language that talks about specifically about a language barrier, I want to see us having some sort of priority and focus in that way that makes sure that we're going out of our way to really reduce barriers and create access for those companies. Because as one of the testifiers spoke about, there aren't HR departments there, and not having an HR department means that a lot of owners with that expertise are having to do a lot of the work that they may not have quite the access or knowledge about. So that's my amendment. I'm offering it definitely within goodwill. I support the bill. I think that the bill is a great step forward in trying to not only indicate to the state how serious we are in a bipartisan way about helping small businesses, but also takes a substantive step forward in really giving us some sort of output or some sort of tangible help to make sure that they're going to be more successful and survive this COVID crisis. So I would like to just pass that along and love to have some thoughts.
I wanted to mention one thing, Mr. Chair, Senator Isaacson. The amendment, one thing that is going on in there that I just wanted to point out was that the micro business carve out would also be, okay, so there are two things going on in the bill. One is to add money to the loan program. Mm-hmm. And the second thing is this grant program. So it carves out some money from the loan program as well. So, and also specifies that would be for the micro businesses, the 5 or fewer employees. So that's one thing. And the other thing would be that I think in both parts, now it's hard for me to have the amendment up at the same time. I think both of them set for both the loans and the grants, it would say you can't apply another time if you already got either the grant or for the loan. And I'm not sure if you mentioned that. I just wanted to point that out.
That's correct. I'm sorry. I did put that in there. Yep.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question of the author of the amendment.
Senator Champion, let me see if Senator Anderson wants to respond first, or if he yield to you first.
I'll yield to Senator Champion.
Senator Champion.
Thank you. Senator Isaacson, can you help me understand? I know that Senate Council tried to put this in context. So it looks like there are two components. One is for the loan program, and then one is for the grant program. And it does a carve out, and it says that priority must be given to individuals with a language barrier, which we want to definitely support them. But tell me how that reconciles with, let's say, African Americans who don't have a language barrier. So then are we suggesting that if they apply, that someone with a language barrier should take priority even over them? So can you help me with that?
Yep. Mr. Chair? Okay. I think that, part of what we have here is a problem of trying to put this stuff together before we hit committee, and the barrier of having to do this over text messages and phone calls. And when I write language barrier, I think that's a clumsy attempt to really talk more clearly about wherever we find ourselves with a cultural access issue within the business community. And I'd be happy to change that language to be more reflective of that. I think I see what you're getting to, and I certainly wasn't an intention where I'm like, we're going to nail down this specific group. And I think that's definitely how it comes across. I meant more of, we need to focus on groups that are not traditionally in the mainstream and able to provide support wherever it's needed, and access is an issue. That's my goal. I'm not quite sure how to articulate that in a change of language, but I hear what you're saying, and I understand and agree.
So I think we should figure that out, because what I think your amendment is doing is creating a situation where we want to make sure that individuals with a language barrier, as well as individuals who have been traditionally not capitalized and not have an opportunity, and now they have their businesses, and we're all going through this COVID deal, and we want to make sure that they too can respond in real time to their needs. But the way this is articulated is that if I am an African American and I don't have a language barrier, then others should take precedent and priority over me. And I don't think that's what we want to do when we think in terms of creating disunity. I think businesses of color, are all in the same space where they're having some challenge. And I think we should find a way to recognize that
Sure.
This amendment causes me some consternation with that language.
And Mr. Chair, I am just not sure how to articulate that, but I would definitely take a friendly amendment that I think Bobby frozen us there, Senate Champion frozen us there. I would definitely take a friendly amendment that would clear that up. I think the language, I'm not quite sure exactly how that would be phrased in a way that would reflect that. I don't know if Carlin has some ideas on what we might do to make that a more meaningful or encompassing amendment that covers that, other than saying, I suppose, minority-owned businesses, and I'm not sure if that's even a correct way to phrase that. So I'd be looking for some advice on that.
Well,
I think that's close. Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair.
I think your amendment does accurately reflect, though, what Senator Herr has been asking for. He has been asking for carve out specifically for business owners where English is not their primary language, and so, or their native language, and that's been clear in his intent. And if you're
Right.
and if you're bringing forward Senator Herr's intent, I think you've done so accurately.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I would say that I think that does reflect Senator Herr, but I think when we talk about a carve out, what I want to do with this language is, I say give a priority to. I'm not saying particularly how much or how hard that should be. That's left open for interpretation for the commissioner to figure out. But I agree with what you're saying, but I also think Senator Champion makes a good point too. And I'm just not sure how to operationalize that in an amendment. And so I'd be
May I?
Please.
I have a suggestion. Maybe we should alter the language and say entrepreneurs facing language and other barriers. That way you include others. And this may be what Senator Herr put forward. And I would hope that Senator Herr did not intend to do what's being represented here. So I would say that that in order to get to Senator Herr's concern and my concern would be just to change that language that particular way. And then I will have a conversation with Senator Herr as well.
Absolutely.
I'd like to let the author at some point respond to the amendment.
Yep.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Senator Isaacson. I know we had a chance to briefly chat about this, but first and foremost, there's a lot of conversation. There's a lot of thoughts and important things that we could do. I wish we had endless resources to reach every business that's struggling right now. Unfortunately, we aren't going to be able to do that. My commitment to this committee and to Senator Isaacson and others is that what I would prefer is that we don't amend it further today. This is going to have more stops going forward. My pledge to you is to continue to work with you, Senator Isaacson. I have been speaking with Senator Herr the last few days. We have done a lot of good work together on this, and so a lot of what Senator Herr would like to see is already in place. So I would rather move forward with the bill as amended previously. And again, my commitment to those who want to be involved in this, that I will work with you going forward. There is not one segment of any of our Senate districts that aren't impacted by this. This is something that I've seen crisis in the past in working in a previous administration for 8 years. And usually it's segmented, usually it's geography, usually it's, this is covering and costing everybody. And so as we go through this, I really want to be able to help as many people as possible. And the focus of the micro business aspect of this is to make sure that those that don't have the resources, that don't have those HR departments, that do get this help. It's not an exclusive micro business bill, but I think the 20% focused on micro businesses is a really good template going forward, as hopefully we have additional attempts at some aid here going forward. But with that, I'll step aside, Mr. Chair.
Next, we have Senator Goggin.
No, I had my hand up earlier about not receiving the email, so I'm good.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Any other questions on the amendment? Senator Isaacson, I'm inclined not to support the amendment today. It sounds like we've got some more work. As Senator Anderson said, I've talked to both Chair Mahoney and Commissioner Grove. It feels like we are very, we'll be able to come very close to an agreement quickly, and certainly the concerns that Senator Herr has raised and continues to raise will be a part of that discussion. And so it feels like, just based on the conversation between you and Senator Champion, maybe this isn't quite ready on the one part. And then if I understand it, we're talking about a 20% carve out or $4 million from the initial $20 million into the loan program, and then a $3 million carve out in the grant program out of the $10 million. Is that correct? So if I look at the amendment, so Senator Anderson has $1 million going to outstate and Metro Minnesota through the grant program. You have that at 1.5, which I thought you said was meant to be 1.5 in each region, a total of 10 out of the 10, or a total of 3 out of the 10. And then you've got the 20% reserved in the loan program, which would be $4 million out of the $20 million allocated to that aspect of the bill.
Carlin, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was what I had taken was the 1.5 million and expanded that within the grants to the micro business. I'm not 100% sure about the 20%. Carlin, can you help me understand that?
Senator Isaacson, I believe that came from Senator Herr's office, the 20% for under the loans. But
oh, I see what you're saying. That's what I was asking about earlier when I about the change.
yes,
Yeah, I get
this
what
would designate 20% of the loans to the micro businesses, and then for the grants, it would be 1.5 or 3 million total. 1.5 for outstate, 1.5.
Yeah, I second in my mind. I got you now. And so let me just say a couple of things real quick, if you don't mind, Senator Pratt.
Please, Senator Isaacson.
So I don't want to put us in a spot where we have to take a negative vote on this, because I think that we're all kind of talking about the same stuff, and it seems to be some unanimity in what we want to accomplish. So I'd be happy to pull the amendment, but I want to say a couple of things to Senator Anderson. One of the things that's hard about pulling the amendment is I may not have a chance to offer an amendment like this till we get to the floor, and by that time, oftentimes ships have sailed. So I really hope myself and Senator Herr and many others can take you at your word that we will have further discussions about what this might look like and why we might think about expanding the grant program for micro businesses that is regionally based, and looking at how we can guarantee that some of that focus goes to minority-owned businesses that allows for more help in that question of access for these small businesses. I really feel really strong about that, and I really wanted to see a vote on this because I want to see us make a better effort, but I don't want to put us in a spot where we're saying no to something when I think that down the road we might be able to agree to that, and I don't want to create a hurdle for that. So I will, at this point, then withdraw the amendment.
Thank you, Senator Isaacson. Do we have any other questions for Senator Anderson or any of our testifiers? Senator Housley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Anderson, for bringing this bill forward. To your point, Senator Isaacson and Champion, in the discussions going forward, do you think maybe, and I know this is, there's going to be a lot of other groups that are going to come forward, but what about the female-owned businesses? I'm sure I'm going to hear from some of my females in the district that are like, why were we excluded from that micro business loan? So if you could, going forward, just put that into the discussion also. And Senator Anderson, I did a chamber meeting this morning, and I brought up your bill that we were going to be hearing in committee today, and I cannot tell you the excitement there was for this, because similar to one of our testifiers, testimony there this morning, they had the exact same difficulty going through the SBA and the EIDL loans and all of the rest of it. So this they were very, very excited about. And to Senator Cohen's point, I know this really puts a wrench in the budget, but $30 million is going to be gone in a heartbeat. I wish this could be more for a lot of our small businesses throughout the state. So thanks again, Senator Anderson, and everybody else.
Before we get to Senator Champion, Mr. Tamale, you know, as we move forward with both the Metro and a Greater Minnesota partner to help distribute the grant funds, how do you see an organization like yours that does help entrepreneurs access capital being involved in this process?
Well, on the lending side, we've been. It took us a few weeks, frankly, to get kind of our machinery up and running. We had to retrain probably a dozen of our staff that were not loan officers to be what we call helpers, to sort of do the outreach to. We had probably 500 inquiries immediately. And then to get our loan officers almost retrained to be like almost like SEMA operators, or they had to reset their whole process and how deep they were underwriting all these deals, et cetera. But now we have that machinery up and running, and I know a number of other groups do, including the groups that have testified here today. So, you know, we're basically hungry for more of that loan money and a carve out for the micro businesses, which is basically what I was suggesting when I testified. I think is a great idea. Regarding the grants, that's a different animal, frankly, and we have to think about that. We'd have to work with you and with DEED and our partner organizations to think about how to do that, because as Senator Housley just said, it's a whole different game, I think, when you are offering grants. That's super important to do, but how that happens is real critical. The communication, the expectations, we have to be careful with that also. So I don't know if that answered your question, Chairman Pratt, but
as good as I would expect after putting you on the spot like that.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Hilsebeck, same question to you. I mean, your organization has been very involved in the initial program.
I didn't even know what the question
How do you see it with the expansion of the program and also your ability to help your clients access money in the grant program, specifically the micro businesses?
Thank you. You know, I'll echo what was just said on the lending side. We were inundated with, 628 applications for this program, for the state program. So a lot of the front end work was getting our systems in place. And, we have a number of lenders on the team, but we're used to handling, a few loans at a time here and there for businesses that are expanding or opening their businesses. So getting 628, we kind of had to change our systems up and everything like that. It's kind of like painting a room. You tape up the walls, you put the mat down and everything like that. And everything that, the prep work takes a while, but then once you got it up and running, then you can operate a little bit faster. And so that's what we've been seeing. We've been administering some local funds as well. And so we've used those efficiencies that we've created in our lending to be able to handle kind of a larger influx of these, local loan programs and grants. And so MCC would certainly be open to this, and we can definitely follow up with you after the meeting.
Okay, and maybe before I get to Mr. Penny with the same question, I'll go to Senator Champion.
Mr. Chair, I was just going to merely respond to Senator Housley and say that the language that I put forward as an accommodation that was entrepreneurs facing language and other barriers could be inclusive of others who are in that area that has historically experienced some challenges, and this just exacerbate the challenges that they have experienced, and would say that this carve out should should give them some level of real consideration and priority consideration. So I think that language, if it's ever adopted and ever really thought through, I think would be important, because it's important for us to think about all of us as who are in those like situations, as opposed to one or the other. So thank you.
Thank you. So maybe I could go to Mr. Penny. Your organization does have experience handing out or managing some of these grant programs. How will this be any different than what you do? Will you have the ability to connect with some of the organizations that I think have collectively been referred to sometimes as DBEs?
Yeah, all of us have relationships with those organizations within our region. And as I mentioned in my opening presentation, we are all staffed with grant making and small business experience to stand a program like this up very quickly. As I mentioned, the early childhood provider grants that went out the door reached 1,600 early childhood providers, and we got that up and running and out the door within 2 weeks' time. So we have the capacity and we have the relationships within our region to make sure that we are making the availability of these small business grants available to a broad spectrum of our population.
Thank you. And Mr. Nickman, you know, I think one of the keys to this program is your organizations were not included in the initial emergency loan program. How many of your members are there that would fall into the category of microbusiness? Would you know or have any idea?
I'd have to get back on that. My guess would be probably at least half would be a single doctor office with maybe 4 to 5 staff, if that's the definition of microloan. But to get specifics, I'd have to get back with you on that.
Okay. Well, thank you. Any other questions for our testifiers? Senator Champion, I see your hand up.
That was, Mr. Chair, that was from before. So I'm sorry. I guess I should have lowered my hand.
We're all getting through this at the same pace, Senator Champion. I don't see any other questions from our members. Senator Anderson, any closing remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Seriously, this is just a great, robust conversation on critical needs that our small businesses have right now. This is not just a passing conversation and building a budget for the Jobs Committee to go into an omnibus bill. This is critical needs right now. And so we know our small businesses are a backbone of our economy. They are hurting. They are devastated. They are days away from closing the doors and walking away. I've heard of, in the last couple of days, a couple of businesses here in the western suburbs that are institutions in our area that have just decided to retire and close the doors. It's just devastating. This wouldn't have happened without this crisis. So I hope we can give this hope and lifeline to our small businesses, our mom and pop Main Street folks that really need our help right now. And again, to Senator Cohen's comments, absolutely, we need to be fiscally responsible, but we also have to look out for those revenue streams that the state won't have if these businesses shut down. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. With that, Senator Eichhorn, would you make a motion to pass the bill and refer to finance?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would move that we, the Senator Anderson's bill do pass the committee and be sent to finance.
Okay. Senator Eichhorn has the motion on the table, Senate File 4481, pass the committee and be referred to finance. Any discussions on the motion? All right, seeing none, if you could say aye and put your thumbs up again if to vote in the affirmative. And when I asked for those voting against the bill to put your thumbs down and say nay. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There we go. Opposed? That motion passes. I want to thank all of our testifiers, Ms. Rasmussen, Mr. Dickman, Mr. Hilsebeck, Mr. Tamale, Mr. Penny. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Senator Anderson, for bringing this bill. And members, thank you for, again, helping us keep the Senate working and doing good work for our people as we address both the healthcare crisis and an economic crisis. With that, we will be adjourned until Monday at 1 o'clock. Members, we will get out the agenda to you as
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I just thought about something. Did we move this bill to the floor?
We moved it to finance.
Oh, to finance. Okay. And when does it go to rules?
It will go to rules, I believe, before it goes to finance. We have a rules committee hearing scheduled, I believe, tomorrow at 3 p.m.
So shouldn't the motion have been to send it to rules?
We checked and the referral to rules was automatic.
Oh, okay.
What I was told. The motion, we actually did have
Mr.
that
Chair, that's
motion
correct.
originally. Ms. Fontaine.
No, I was just going to say that's correct. It would just go direct. It would go automatically to rules. So you're good.
All right. Well, with that, we'll stand adjourned until Monday at 1 p.m. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you.